Namaste everyone. Welcome to our weekly Interfaith Dialogue. Today's our guest speaker is Ambassador His Excellency Isaac Z. Chabala. He is the former ambassador of Zambia to the United Nations and the European Union. He's our longtime friend and a mentor for me, especially at the UN and all other activities. He was very involved with the sustainable development goals, still is going on with all the goals. He's supporting a lot of NGOs. He's one of the ambassadors who is really down to earth and help a lot of leaders. Thank you, Ambassador, for joining in this wonderful day, especially it's a snow day in New York City. Ambassador, floor is for you.
Thank you very much, my brother Guru, for arranging this and especially for inviting me to share my insights and experience with the, shall I call it, spiritual life. Now, before I do that, I just want to start on a note of interfaith collaboration, because the essence of what I'm going to talk about, and in particular the principal goal of the United Nations and of humanity at large, is peace. So the importance of interfaith collaboration and dialogue is cardinal. And I start with the premise that, in essence, we are all one. We are one big family, all brothers and sisters, created by the same one God. And this is the God of many names, the God we worship when we go to church, when we go to the mosque, to the synagogue, to the temple, other places of worship. And the main message of all religions, all prophets and messengers sent by our one God, is to love each other and to help people who are poor, marginalized, needy, and the least among our brothers and sisters. And here, speaking again from my faith tradition of Christianity, I'm always reminded of the message contained in Matthew 25, verses 31 to 40, when on the final judgment, we'll be asked, what did you do to help the hungry, to help the prisoner and those in need? And the answer will be, whatever we did for the least of the brothers and sisters, you did for me. And that's the God we worship. This, I believe, from a Christian perspective, is the main message. We are here created out of love by the one God of many names. And we are here to love others. And we are here to ensure that peace, everyday peace, is enjoyed by one and all. So again, on this note of Interfaith Collaboration. It's extremely important for us to recall, because sometimes we do take for granted the role of interfaith dialogue, collaboration. Again, I've been involved with United Nations for quite some time. I believe that the interfaith collaboration and cooperation has been very, very instrumental in spreading the message of peace and in reaffirming our unity for a culture of peace through interfaith harmony. And I know that at United Nations, we have done this, we have commemorated this through our annual Interfaith Harmony Week. So interfaith dialogue and cooperation has helped to bridge tensions between the collective ideals of the United Nations and the conduct of individual member states. Religious institutions have also made an invaluable contribution to peace building operations and conflict resolution. They play an indispensable role in the restoration of trust and confidence between people who are recovering from armed conflict, as evident in the disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration process. They have also demonstrated divine inspiration for global nuclear disarmament. And also, importantly, we are here and must acknowledge the need to build on the demonstrated potential of religious leaders and faith-based organizations and movements. So, to repeat, interfaith dialogue and harmony is an indispensable foundation for peace to succeed. And it is the responsibility of religious leaders and members of society to nurture solidarity through the multiple waves of relationships and to disseminate the values of peace, harmony, and dialogue so that they become the shared heritage of humanity. We all have the responsibility, individually and collectively, to lay the ground for everyday peace in our hearts, in our homes, in our communities, in our nations, and in the world. Now, if I may say at a personal level, I believe that I came to recognize the importance of spirituality growing up at a very, very early age. And here I pay tribute to the role that my parents, my mother, my father, and my siblings played. This was critical, and especially now looking back, I realized that there is no way I could be the person I am without the critical and cardinal contribution, the love, the care, that I enjoyed growing up. And this is an issue of great importance. And for me, I feel to some extent emotional. The unconditional love I enjoyed in our home. And in particular, the role played by my mother, I call her a saint, and also my siblings, the elder sisters, was very, very instrumental in who I grew up to become. So the role of family, the role of a home is very cardinal in nurturing the values, the spiritual, the moral dimension of who we become. And in my case, I see that it has also played a very significant role in acknowledging the dignity and divinity of God's creation of man and woman. And in particular, going to, again, the message of Genesis, the message that God created us, man and woman, equal. Hence, respect for the dignity and divinity of especially our women. This is a cardinal point. It has a strong bearing also to what has become my vocation, the spiritual calling for gender equality and empowerment of women and girls, because it has a direct relevance to the way I grew up, I was brought up, who cared for me, who loved me. It was my mother, my sisters, and there's no way I could have become who I am without the love I enjoyed, the care that I enjoyed growing up. Now, if I may, again, I grew up in that family, loving family, God-fearing family. And I also grew up in a community. It's a community, again, where I had the experience of demonstrating and sharing the love that I enjoyed at home in the family. And in our African community setting, and again, I pay tribute to the values and the virtues of the community. As we say in Africa, it takes a village to raise a child. I recall vividly on several occasions, mother telling me and my siblings, when you go out in the village, you meet up with an elder woman. You don't call them by the name. You prefix in our vernacular language, Mayo, which is mother. You are greeting, you meet somebody, you start with the prefix mother so and so, or father so and so. You prefix. And this was taught us and growing up. So if I met a woman elder woman, I would greet her. Good morning, mother. And I would go back, later on report to my mother, oh, mommy, mother, I met so and so. It's the mother, John's mother. So prefix, everyone in the community, in the village, was either a mother, a father, and an uncle, etc. So I pay tribute again to the teaching and the experience that I had. And all these teachings and experience were grounded, they were founded on love. And all these has strong bearings to, what when we discuss we have the goals, there's sustainable development goals, and which are all meant to contribute to the enjoyment of peace. So growing up in a Christian family or a God-fearing family, growing up in a community, this is again, rural community, and prepared me to what happened later. And I remember it was time now for me to go to boarding school. I was accepted to join the only one, perhaps the major boarding school, secondary school in, at the time it was Northern Rhodesia, what is Zambia, what became Zambia in 1964. And so leaving home was not a pleasant experience. I was leaving home for another place. I'd never lived away from home. And this is a boarding school, and I was talking to my parents, oh, I don't want to go. Why am I going? And the parents said, no, it's time to go. And just remember how you have grown and what we have taught you. And most importantly, you are not alone. God is with you. You are never alone. God is with you. Everything is going to be all right. I left home reluctantly to a boarding school in the capital city. I was living a rural environment in Wapula province, 10-hour drive to what is the capital city of Zambia, or Northern Rhodesia at the time, because we were still a colony of Britain. And so I went and for my secondary school, I spent 6 years. And well, again, it's extremely important that I dependent on God and also benefiting from the critical upbringing, God-fearing upbringing I had with my family. And after secondary school, at that time, in fact, Zambia became independent. In 1964, I just completed my high school. And I was selected to do upper secondary school, grading, which was a British system, so Form 6, they used to call it, advanced high school, and then joined the University of Zambia. Now, University of Zambia, it was the first university that was constructed, as a matter of fact, by the new independent nation of Zambia. Now, again, I should indicate that this is it's a wonderful achievement, because during British colonial rule, all the years, 100 years or so, that the territory had no university. And one of the first acts of the new government, the independent government, was to build a university. And I was among, at the time that university was built, I was among the 1,000 high school graduates. Again, I'm staying away at the moment, but it says a lot. It's a record of what British colonial rule meant. So I was privileged to be among the first students at the new university. This was a new experience. And again, you know, as you all know, the experience of college, life is quite different. You know, you're independent, etc. And that's where, again, I leaned on my spiritual upbringing. I remained very loyal to the teaching and the practice, the values inculcated in me, thanks to the dedication, devotion, and love of my family and the community at large. So on completion of my undergraduate degree in economics, I majored in economics and French. I made a conscious decision to join the public service, to serve the people. So it was interesting. I was somewhat getting involved now in what I would say it was a realm of deciding where my passion was, what was best for me, and especially in the context of what was happening around me. See, Zambia had become independent 1964, and we still had neighboring countries around us, which were still not independent. We were surrounded by 8 countries. Zambia still is surrounded by 8 countries, but we had in our neighboring countries still the issue of colonial domination. We had 2, for instance, or in particular, we had Mozambique, Angola, 2 of our neighbors still under Portuguese colonial rule. We had Namibia. Namibia was it was a trusteeship of the United Nations. And we had South Africa, the apartheid system, government of South Africa had control over the trusteeship country of Namibia. So, and of course, the 2 other neighbors, with Congo had become independent. Tanzania was independent as well. But most importantly, the critical role that Zambia played immediately after attaining independence was to welcome the refugees from the neighboring countries, now including South Africa. In particular, the executive committee of the African National Congress, which had to flee South Africa, apartheid South Africa, after the incarceration of Nelson Mandela. You see, Nelson Mandela, we all know, was unjustly incarcerated for 27 years. Now, this was, I remember vividly, it was on 6th June 1964 when he was sentenced to serve 27 years of imprisonment on Robben Island. And the entire executive committee of the African National Congress and thousands of supporters of the African National Congress had to flee. And they fled to Zambia. The newly independent country of Zambia welcomed these freedom fighters. And it was not a small price at all. It's not it was a very bold act. And we were all very proud of what we did. And we supported our leadership in this. And just imagine, the country had just become independent and almost instantaneously was in the front line of the struggle now for the liberation of the region. Liberation of our people, our brothers and sisters who were still under colonial and racist domination. So that had an effect, an impact on my growing up, matter of fact. I remember vividly our leaders. Our leaders at the time, of course, led at the founding. Our founding president is still alive, President Dr. Kenneth Kaunda. He's 96 years young. I say young because he's still full of life. And his background, again, is important because he was the son of a Reverend David Kaunda. So very God-fearing background. And under his moral leadership and the underlying moral leadership and God-fearing persona, he was able to first galvanize, that's prior to independence, bring together the 73 ethnic tribes of then Northern Rhodesia before it became independent under the banner of One Zambia, One Nation. And I remember vividly, he would say, Tiende pamozi, meaning let's march together, ndi mutima umozi, with one heart. Let's move, let's march together with one heart until Zambia's freedom and independence was accomplished. Now, fast forward to after we became independent, he welcomed all political, all those refugees from South Africa I've mentioned, and also subsequently from Namibia, what has become Namibia. It used to be Southwest Africa, but it's trusteeship of the UN. They all were resident. They got refuge, and safety and security in Zambia. In the case of ANC, African National Congress, for more than 30 years until Nelson Mandela was released from Robben Island. And his motivation was, so long as our neighbors remain under colonial and racist domination, Zambia's freedom and independence will remain in jeopardy. That was the clarion call. And he was in real life demonstrating the love your neighbor as yourself spiritual gift, if I may put it that way. It was not easy for a young, freshly minted independent country to exercise that kind of compassion, generosity, and welcome as we did. But we all did, and we did it very, very willingly. And I knew growing up, this man, our leader, and our leadership were doing something, it was exceptional, but I was young, it was exciting. So that had a very strong bearing as well on my decision to join the civil service, the public service. It was like some way of giving up, giving back, not just to Zambia, but even beyond. You see, there I was now. I had the opportunity, first starting from home, my family I've talked about, my community I grew up, the rural community, and then through school, university, and now at the national level, practicing what we were taught when we went to church. So I was very happy. I felt proud when I was signed, and I didn't ask where to serve, but of course they looked at my degree was in economics and French, so they assigned me to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And there I was on the desk, on the UN desk. I was assigned. I wasn't asking. No, the government put me wherever. I was at the discretion. I was ready to serve wherever they felt I was needed. So I joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I was assigned to the UN Directorate, United Nations Directorate. And there I was able to help with my French, translations, interpretations from time to time. And at the same time, I was dealing with economic and finance aspects of the United Nations. And now, subsequently, the government again, with the British, called the British government, they arranged for my scholarship to go for postgraduate at University of Oxford, St. Peter's College, and they had to specialize in international studies with a direct bearing to the diplomatic service. It was an exciting time again. And again, my spirituality was growing because serving, and this was for the first time, I traveled abroad, and I was at this famous university. It was welcoming and challenging presence, but I enjoyed it. As a young man, I enjoyed it, and I remember getting involved in quite a number of activities, especially interconnections, now getting to know more about what was happening even here in the United States. And it was very exciting because we had, groups, African Americans, and so I got involved in the activities. So following up on the civil rights movements, etc. And I recall at the time, and this is interesting because I was, some of you may be aware of what was happening in the civil rights movement in the 70s, early 70s. And I used to wear a badge with a woman by the name Angela Davis. Every time I had my coat on at this, because a lot of things were happening out on the West Coast. It was 1971, 70. So Angela Davis was there, and it was like, of course, meaning, look, this is my spirituality. I'd taken that dimension of what? Applying, speaking up, and applying, right? Living out my spirituality, really. Because with issues of right and wrong. And this reminds me again of Isaiah chapter 1, verse 17. I always quote that verse as, paraphrase: learn to do right, stop doing wrong, stand up for the oppressed, defend the orphan, and support the widow. I'm paraphrasing, but I had the opportunity at Oxford to do just that. And again, very much leaning on foundation of love and my spirituality. Now, upon completion, and again, I say thanks. I enjoyed my training at Oxford and St. Peter's College in particular. And I returned to Zambia, and I was assigned into the Career Foreign Service. My first posting was in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, in 1973. Now, it is interesting that I'm, as I recall, because this appointment was the first time I was serving abroad as a career diplomat. It came at a time when Zambia, again, playing a frontline as a frontline nation in a struggle against apartheid or racism and the colonialism. We had the conflict with what has become Zimbabwe, but it was Southern Rhodesia. There had been, in 1965, the rebel regime declared independence from Britain unilaterally. This was a regime of white I would say descendants of Britain, of course. And Ian Smith was a man, and he just, with a group of white nationalists, if I may put it that way, declared themselves independent of Britain. And Zambia, of course, was, as I said, providing refuge and safety and security to liberation movements. And to cut a long story short, the rebel regime decided to close the border with Zambia. Zambia closed the border to literally strangle us. economically. Now, the objective was for Zambia to stop supporting the liberation movements. And in this case, in particular, the freedom fighters from what was Southern Rhodesia, and also the African National Congress, of course, from South Africa. For meaning, they wanted us to strangle us. It was blackmail, clear blackmail, to get rid of all the freedom fighters. So they closed our border. And to transport, I know Zambia has been historically copper mining. It's a mining country. One of the major producers and exporters of copper and emeralds and cobalt. And we had to transport our exports and imports through Southern Rhodesia and then onto the coast, Durban, South Africa. So almost more than 90% of our foreign trade. So when this happened, Zambia had to seek support from the United Nations. And I look back, this was 1973. We wrote to the United Nations, the Security Council in particular, and a resolution was adopted by Security Council. And under this resolution, the UN was requesting member states to provide international assistance to Zambia to enable the transportation of our foreign trade. So I was appointed by the government to Dar es Salaam to help facilitate the shipment of our goods. And I didn't stay long. Strategy changed. I was then transferred to the United Nations headquarters here. And in that capacity, as UN liaison officer, with the United Nations, we had the UN Zambia Assistance Program set up. And my role there was to draft resolutions and to monitor and to negotiate resolutions with membership, not just the General Assembly, but also the agencies, etc. At the same time, I represented Zambia on the second committee, the Economic and Finance Committee. It was a very exciting time, very busy. And I served in that class for 6-7 years. And then subsequently, I requested for a recall and I needed to get back home. I was missing my mother, although I was actually at a family. And so I went back to Zambia in 1979. Now, through it all, when I got back, of course, I was assigned to the Minister of Finance as Undersecretary for Budget and Finance and Economic Affairs, and worked with the Prime Minister's office as well. Now, through all this period, my spiritual life, I would say, blossomed. And that, for me, was the most important thing. And serving at the United Nations, even subsequently when I was, in 1988, I was sent back to the ministry here, to the mission, and subsequently became ambassador, served also in Geneva and Brussels. I was ambassador to the European Union. My spiritual life really spirituality has been the backbone of my service. And my spirituality has blossomed because it has now gone to the extent of embracing God's creation, whole creation. I don't just look at myself as a Christian. No, I'm a spiritual human being with connections to beautiful brothers and sisters, like we have Guruji here and all others. I'm an interfaith person, just as I've become more than just a Zambian citizen. I'm more of a global citizen. And that's the essence of spirituality. That's the essence of spirituality. And this is important because you grow, you blossom into a being more in line with the original design, God's intent. And when that happens, and I'm in my second half of my spiritual life, and the second part of my spiritual life becomes very interesting because I do the things, I'm committed to do things that I absolutely must do because they are my destiny and my deepest desire. That is growing up to embrace all of God's creation, human and non-human. So I am involved very, very much, as I said at the very beginning. My vocation, my spiritual mission has become, I didn't just dream about it. It's another story that can take some time for me to share with you. But I prayed after I formally retired as ambassador to the European Union. I prayed to God just a year before I go. I prayed to God, as I prepare to move on my spiritual journey, let it be not what I want to do, but what you want me to do. And after 14 months, I received the revelation. The revelation touched on book of Isaiah, chapter 1, verse 17. Very, very interesting. Very interesting. Very much empowerment of women, the marginalized. And that's what I've been doing over the past 20 years or so. So women's empowerment, it's the vision given to me by the Supreme Being. It's not just my vision anymore. It is God's vision for me that I am participating in. I'm involved in other things. And it so happens, very interesting. I know, Guruji, I'm going beyond my time, but look, very, very interesting. When I came back to the United Nations, I came back after retirement, and the first NGO I worked with, headed by a woman, and she approached me. So there happened to be a friend. She was helping HIV/AIDS orphans in Zambia. And she asked me, I'd known her for a long time, we were growing up, and said, can you help me run this as executive director? And ITEZO, International Trust for the Education of Zambian Orphans. And I said, well, what do you want me to do? I said, well, you see, there are these HIV/AIDS kids. They are being cared for by their grandmothers, and their grandmothers don't have anything. They have very little except the love. Can you help? So, cut a long story short, we had to mobilize assistance, funds from donors from abroad. And as I said, I served in Geneva and Brussels. We helped to mobilize the money. And at the same time, because we had the churches, um, the religious organizations, they know even now they are best informed in identifying the most vulnerable orphans. And then so we had the funds, and then we had the children, and working with the Ministry of Social Services, we were able to place these kids in the best secondary schools, the best secondary schools. And something that made me cry, weep with joy was to, after like 3-4 years of this activity, these kids, some of them were accepted into university and professional training, you know, like as accountants, etc. That was beautiful. So here it is, a woman approaches me and I said, yes, I'm going to help. I wasn't reaching out, Googling and no. And I came back to New York, the same thing happened. We would just meet and at UN, etc. And, oh, are you Ambassador Chabala? Yes, I am, madam. I'm so-and-so, this is what I do. And I said, what can I do? How can I help you? This is what happened. I'm involved. I serve on executive board, on the boards of NGOs run by women. And I didn't go out looking for them. No, it's by, I say, the work of the Spirit uniting us. This is what happens when you have, you are working, participating in the vision of God. And that is the power of spirituality. And as I've said before, I have committed myself and my life to serving my God and to participating in the vision that He has for me. And this is a vision of unconditional love, loving others regardless of how they look, their color, their place of worship. And in so doing, my interfaith connectivity has blossomed. I'm in my year as a senior citizen, and I see, you know, I feel I enjoy it in a sense, enjoy just living, the joy of living now, because as I said, I don't have my own visions. No, I live in the vision. I am, you know, like, and I'm quoting, you know, it's one of very good is a spiritual. Sorry. Can you see me? Sorry, I think I messed up your. You know, I'm just ending. It's a book written by Richard Rohr. Richard Rohr is a Christian author, and you know, it's a book called Falling Upward. I know, and it's a spirituality for the two halves of life. Spirituality for the two halves of life. And it is very interesting book. Again, I'm not acting as his agent, but it's one of the books that I found extremely interesting. You know, looks at the two halves of our lives, and especially what happens in my case as I'm living in the second half of life, you know. And he says in the very last part of the last segment, he says, and I'm in the we move from, and it's a quotation, from the driver's seat to being a happy passenger, one who is still allowed to make helpful suggestions to the driver with a capital D. And you know who that driver is. We are henceforth a serene disciple, living in our own unique soul as never before. Yet paradoxically, living within the mind and heart of God and taking our place in the great and general dance. End of quotation. On that, I'll pause. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I always hear new stories from different days. I'm glad you are able to join today. So we are going to open up for question and answer sections. So I'll start from my side. I know you work with the different NGOs and different missions, UN bodies. You see long examples of life from the UN life. So I asked this one, what are the major issues around the world to be resolved very soon? And why people cannot finish major problems like gender equality or peace or war. War is the main thing. And even see the crisis of corona. They cannot get along and they delay things, even research. So how we can handle this situation, because our life is very short. We cannot waste our life for somebody's decisions,
Yes.
like hear from you.
Thank you very much. That's you have posed an existential question, and just quote you said, you referenced the brevity of our lives, and that again has direct bearing with spirituality, because we live at a time when, and we know this, we have, according to a scientist, barely 10 years or so, and this touches on the issue of climate change, and I'm involved with. And a direct bearing on how we treat God's creation, how we treat our mother planet and planet Earth. When I say we, collectively, direct bearing on our misbehavior and disobedience of God's commandment to nurture, to steward, right? Reverence for life and reverence for our planet, our Mother Nature. So, and time, you rightly pointed out, time is very short. This is an existential issue. We don't have long to correct the wrongs. We know what we need to do. In spite of that, we do the wrong things. Even as I speak, and we live here in the United States, we still have denial of climate change at the very highest of our leadership. Now there, it's not a question of whether you which party you are for. No, it's a matter of right and wrong. Let's bring these issues to the right and wrong. Is it the right thing to do or not? It's not to what party you claim to support. Now, clearly, we have to speak up, and more than just speak up, act out to ensure that we do the right thing. We cannot have leadership that pretends you know, nothing is wrong with us. Man is not responsible for what's going on. We cannot. And I say we because the choice is us. So responsibility starts at the individual level, at the collective level, but especially individual level. Each one of us has direct responsibility for the well-being of our humanity, for the well-being of God's creation, the stewardship. God did not create us to dominate in an exploitative way. So, first of all, people must speak up. Don't pretend. They speak up and act out. When somebody says, no, 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 man has nothing to do with the state of climate or Mother Earth, we have to say, no, it's not true. Now, in that regard, again, I speak regardless of whether I'm this and that, which party I support. I am with a sigh of relief that we are having a change in the leadership here in the United States. We are having an incoming administration that is committed or will be committed from past experience to climate change issues. It has a demonstrated leadership in the past, and by the role that they played in the Paris Agreement. And we are going to, when I say we collectively and individually, demand of the very best or the highest priority to climate change issues. We know the damage that has already been done over the past 4 years here in the United States. And I speak as a global citizen, but this is United States as a principal, as a special role in terms of leadership, in terms of the responsibility for the global warming and all the issues that we are having. Yes, I know at the United Nations we've accepted a question of, in terms of responsibility, same but differentiated responsibility, but the United States has a very critical role to play. So let's welcome, let's celebrate what has happened here in the United States. I'm also very happy that, again, going to my vocation, the spiritual calling, we are having for the first time, the first woman vice president. It is exciting news. And the first person of color to be in that, to enjoy that privilege. She's capable. And the two, President Biden and Vice President Harris, working together as persons of faith, as persons of faith, God-fearing leadership, moral leadership that we need. It's essential in every country, in every community. We need moral, principled leadership. And we've looked at, the program that they have, the incoming administration has. It provides a source of relief. But agency, we must act with extra agency. And the United States, we welcome the United States back into our human family. And we will demand and ask of them, the administration, to do their very best. So that's one, respect for the dignity and divinity of God's creation. That's a condition sine qua non that must be fulfilled by the entire membership of the United Nations and especially starting with each one of us, because this is individual responsibility. We are the ones who go to elect our leaders. We have to learn from what has happened or not happened in the United States. The vote is extremely important. It's powerful, the most non-violent weapon, according to John Lewis. Again, an acclaimed and esteemed justice and peace warrior. So that is one. Now, issues of, you asked me in general, what the pandemic, and we have several pandemics now, but the pandemic that has triggered the agency, extra, in fact, adding to the existential nature of the problem that faces humanity right now. The COVID-19 pandemic has shone the light, and I've said this repeatedly, everyone knows, shone the light on what needs to be done. And so the point I've been speaking to, the issue of climate change as an existential issue. The COVID has, as we know, demonstrated the disproportionate impact of all the other pandemics on the most vulnerable. And we know, especially, the Black and brown people and the most vulnerable people. It's very, very clear, very clear. No one can pretend not to see what has happened. We have lost the great majority of Black and brown people who have been adversely affected. Many have died, many are in hospital, etc. Now, with a view to what? For us to right the wrongs, the inequalities, the injustices, the disparities. Some of them systemic, institutional, like racism, that have afflicted certain societies, like especially in the United States and globally. So the inequalities in health, inequalities in education, inequalities, income and wealth inequalities, how also we treat our women, that's the gender inequalities, and how we treat other people, especially those who look different from us. You see, thanks to the pandemic has shone the light. You see, we don't curse darkness. We have to shine, to light, right? That is what, when issues like this, when pandemics happen, let's embrace, discern what is happening, what is the meaning, what are we called upon to do? In this case, very clearly, don't pretend that climate change does not exist. No, and those who pretend and they indulge in disinformation, for what? Because they are gaining, and sadly, it's not money, it's the love of money. They want to maintain power, they want to dominate, they want to control. Obviously, those things are evil. They are at variance with the will of God. The will of God is for all of us to live in harmony. The will of God is for us to demonstrate reverence for life and to be aware of the suffering caused by issues such as killing, issues such as racism, the issues of gender inequality, and and climate change. We have to, and to be able to cultivate in us that love of, or rather manifestation of the love of for respect for lives, the lives of people, lives of animals, of minerals, etc. So that's one thing, and I've labored on this, is critical. What you asked the question, the agency is now, the United Nations has been coordinating, as it does, in fact, what the United Nations does, and the Secretary General, who I have respect for the Secretary General. I've known him. He's somebody, when I was in Brussels, I was accredited to Portugal as ambassador. And he was back then Prime Minister, a man of integrity, a God-fearing man. And he's also, like me, a feminist. He's a staunch advocate and activist for women's rights, And he has given us, he has alerted leadership all over, leadership of our world, that we have to act together in harmony, or risk to fall apart. And that is in part, one part of the essence of the United Nations. And I love the United Nations. So the nation, the world must act as one. Humanity must act as one to address the impact of the COVID and other pandemics, climate change. We have racial discrimination and racism, which, as he said it, I believe when he gave his statement during the commemoration of Nelson Mandela Day, he called racial discrimination an abomination. Yes, it's evil. And this is what has afflicted, especially here in the United States, systemic and institutionalized racism for 402 years. Racism and racial discrimination, exists in other countries, but varying measures. It's an abomination wherever it does exist. And everything must be done to condemn it, and most importantly, to eradicate it. So that's the one. So I've touched, I'm sure I've touched on the respect. Everything comes from the respect for the dignity and divinity of God's creation. Human beings are non-human beings, our planet. And I'm very happy because, we know that the Sustainable Development Goals, of course, I've included all these sustainability. The number one thing has been people, the 5 Ps, people, love of people, do everything that we do. Everything must be done in the interest, for the best interest of the people. And I'll talk about this all the time. The 3 first words of preamble to the UN Charter, we the people. It doesn't say we the government, so no, it's we the people first, and then planet, okay, then we have peace, and then we have a partnership, and there is 1 P, I'm forgetting, prosperity. The 5 Ps undergirding the objectives of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. These are meant to serve as a guide. So the agency, again, going to what you said, we don't have much time. Yes, but first of all, most important, for us to continue to exist, we need to clean up the act. We need to have a safe and healthy place to live. Let's take care of Mother Earth. Climate change is real, And those who pretend otherwise are just not right, to put it very, very mildly. But at the same time, I referenced vulnerables because as I said when I made a few opening remarks, the message is to love oneself, love the other, and also take care of the most vulnerable, right? And again, you find this appears in this SDG, the future, our document, the future we want, right? A key principle in the so preamble to that is to leave no one behind, leaving no one behind. So you can see here the UN very much acting always inspired by spiritual and moral and ethical values. So caring for the most vulnerable, and especially at a time like this, one of the pandemics is the hunger pandemic. You can see, even here in the United States, the richest country in the world, at least 26 million people are in the food insecure category. And I know a few months back, the executive director of World Food Program, by the way, kudos to the World Food Program for winning the Nobel Peace Prize. The executive director had warned, had alerted the international community to the upcoming hunger pandemic, which is going to add almost 130 million people in the food insecure area. Now, who are going to be affected disproportionately, just like COVID has done? It is the least, the most vulnerable, the poor, etc. Again, the core is very clear. As I said, thanks to the pandemic, it shines the light on the injustices, the inequalities, the disparities, for us to do what? To respond compassionately and with love, with kindness, and with humility. That's what we need to do, to help those who are in need. And this is the critical message of even interfaith, our interfaith collaboration that I spoke about. So talking from a universal perspective, you find that the countries in the least developed, island developing, landlocked, the poorest countries, they need our help. Generosity, loving generosity is key. Again, it's a spiritual value. And those who have, and the Bible says this, in fact, in all of our sacred texts, for those who have, to he who has more needs, more is demanded, right? So that's again, this is a time to demonstrate optimal, even beyond that, the best generosity and compassion and kindness. And we don't have to ask where they know. We just, those who have, and a lot of people, a lot of countries, and even individuals have means to donate, foodstuffs or whatever is needed, wherever on our mother or global home. So that's extremely important. And I'm saying this question of this is, how we address these barriers, the superficial barriers which separate us. And sadly, color, complexion. Look at what's happening. Look at the healthcare workers, and kudos to them. Healthcare workers, the nurses, the doctors, and they're risking their lives. They are sacrificing their lives, risking them for the good of who? They don't ask, oh, where you come from, or you look white, you're black, and that kind of thing. No. They are focused on the humanity, to address what is wrong. In this case, this is the this is the virus, and objective is do no harm, right? Provide the care, the assistance that is required. That's what they're doing. And it's remarkable because I live here in Upper East Manhattan, and there was a time when exactly at 7 o'clock in the evening, you would hear gong, 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 you know, a tribute to our healthcare workers, thanking them, gratitude, you know, for what they are doing. Again, these are people, they are mostly, and look, because we haven't had sufficient healthcare workers, so we have had to, many have come from different places and countries, right? They're black, they're brown, etc. And they're the ones who are saving our hospitals, etc. Okay? And they don't, when they are healing, providing care, and they don't ask, oh, you look white, therefore. No, these are professionals. Most important, they are spiritual human beings. They do what they need to do. So this, we have to learn, discern, learn from our experiences in terms of to guide us, to lead us in addressing our wrongs, the injustices, the inequalities, the disparities. So in a sense, you find that what has happened, the pandemic has served to bring us back, more like a call, bring us back to the roots where we are coming, you know. And as we do that, let's be open. And when we are open and humble, we realize the wrongs that we have done. And from a spiritual perspective, when you do that, you repent. You have to confess of your sin and repent. So we are back to the roots, to reset, to repent, to rehabilitate, so that we come back, not to repeat the same things that we've been doing, mistreating or ill-treating other people because of what they look like or where they're coming from. No, to do better, to love and love and love more, because love is the foundation of the healing that humanity needs now, before, and going forward. And I believe, and I'm an optimist, because ultimately love never ends. Love uplifts, right? Love never ends. We were created, we are the product of God's love, right? And love never ends. Ultimately, and we have a God who is a redeeming God. He forgives. And forgiveness, by the way, is a very important virtue. You know, forgiveness is a very important virtue. And God wants us to forgive. And all of us, even when we are wronged, we have to be prepared to forgive. And here, you know, I take solace, I take comfort from my experience. I had referenced earlier the issue of apartheid South Africa, okay? And that was resolved. And you know, Nelson Mandela, when he was released, he led this movement together with the Desmond Tutu, Archbishop Desmond Tutu is of the Anglican Church. They led this movement to do what? To forgive the former oppressor, the oppressor apartheid regime. Yes, South Africans, the majority blacks, they forgave. And this, you are familiar with that, came up with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And all that it required was for the oppressor, the former, those who belong to the, who had done wrong, committed wrong, to confess, yes, I did this. I killed the black, etc., etc. And then they aggrieved the victim families did what? Forgave. So forgiveness is a virtue, and I believe that this is what this is serving. Um, um, so I'm very confident that we are coming out of this conflict, this pandemic, loving better and bigger, and embracing one another in love, unity, solidarity, and joy. So I've taken, I know, answering your question, but you asked existential questions, and I thought that I should.
You brought all the wide range. You are a universalist. You promote universal spirituality more than anything else. You are the universal citizen. There's no doubt about that.
Thank you.
I became a leader in the world, make a universal passport. You'll get the first one.
No, you get the first, because I know you've done so much, Guruji, and bring us all. And I think, yes.
We have a birthday boy, Raj Bhushan, is brother one, that's from our board member. And I'll give him the first chance to ask question.
Yes.
Brother Chabala, Namaste, Reverend Darius,
Thank you.
and everyone on the panel.
Thank you.
It was quite fascinating to hear your conviction with Christian faith and the love you received from your family. My question is focused on if you can touch on a personal life situation which was transformative. Like you grew up in a loving environment, and you had to go to the boarding school. Then it was a transition, and now coming to the retirement in terms of let God's will prevail. How did you arrive at that, or is simply God's grace, or is it a personal effort? So if you touch on your personal triumphs and tragedies in invoking God's presence and guiding you through that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, power-packed question. Yes, there have been some personal experiences which I would say have triggered or reminded me, because look, the spiritual journey is, or put it mildly, not an easy journey. And sometimes we go astray. It happened in my case as well. It was a time I was at university, for instance, for my undergrad. And there were moments, even as I knew I was very much dependent on my God in everything. Now the experience at university, undergrad, for the first time, it was all exciting things, and I had access to a lot of stuff that I'd never read before. And I was doing, for instance, part of my French major, major, I was doing French, literature and involved some, I was reading up on philosophies, etc., etc. And I remember I came up with, by you may know that Jean-Paul Sartre who was an existentialist, did not believe, people don't believe in God, right? The existence of God, etc. So a lot of things that I had access to, a lot of other German philosophers, etc. Now, I recall specifically, because I had to do the reading, and I did also a minor, it was some study in psychology. So I was coming across currents or experiences kind of at variance with the way I had been brought up, studying the Bible and living up according to the Bible. So this was somewhat, to some extent, quite challenging because I had to understand their philosophies, the atheist philosophies, people who do not necessarily believe in God, existence of. So as a young person, you know, I had occasionally become very, very seriously trying to understand what this was all about. But at the same time, of course, realizing that it was trying to question some of what, you know, the essence of what had become. Um, so that was quite a challenge. And occasionally, I mean, I was not attending church. Presumably, you know, I was too busy, you know, and yet I'd been brought up attending church every Sunday. So, and until I remember one day at, again, this undergrad time period, somebody who knew my family well, because my father was in business and was well known. I said, you, and this man was a senior student, and he was telling, he met me, he was saying, we don't see you in church. And then I know you, I know your family, I know your parents. And look, I'm recalling this incident of 1960 something, 1966. And I tell you, I just, it hit me. It hit me. And I just knelt down and said, what is happening to me? What this man said, we don't see you in church. We know your family. A realization. You see, moments such as that, thing like happens like that, you are reminded of what you need to be doing. You see, we all, at one point or another, we sort of like go astray, or we ignore to do things that we mean to do. And so that helped me, and I corrected myself. I changed course. And as for the stuff I was reading about atheism and all that kind of thing, again, it helped to remind me that, hey, so far, nothing can shake the backbone of my life, the foundation that my parents and siblings and community have helped shape in me. So that was one. Now, tragedies, and I'm glad you mentioned it. Tragedies have had tragedies which have, instead of sinking me, again, they've lifted me. They've added extra notches to my spirituality. One, I've had quite a few, you know, human strategies, losses in my family. One in particular involved the loss. My mother was elderly. She died in early 90s. She was in the 90s. Christian woman. I still call her a saint. My mother had been ill. She had had a stroke, and she was in hospital. And it was just a matter of time. And I was serving at that time, serving with the Prime Minister, Office of the Prime Minister. And I reference to what I was doing just because I don't like talking about, you know, but I was in charge of the economics and finance stream, and also our speech writing for the Prime Minister. And when the news came, my daughter received the call, and then my elder sister called me. This is what had happened. Mama has passed, and we need to prepare to go and put her to rest. So I saw the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister gave me permission to express condolences and to travel. And now this was a Thursday, July 24th, 1986. And we took off the following day in my car. It's a long trip, but we decided to take the short route. I'll omit some details because they are more emotional. Make me, to cut a long story short, it was myself, my wife, and then my sibling, my elder sister. And this woman was the most spiritual amongst my siblings, all of us. Deeply, she was chairperson of the Women's Brigade. Now in Africa, when you go to the Anglican Union, Anglican Church, the Women's Brigade are the backbone of the church. Really. She was at the time the chairperson. So we rode. Now, to cut a long story short, on our way just about 100 kilometers to our hometown, our village, we were traveling near, just through the Congolese part of the street. To cut a long story short, no details yet. I mean, my car, it was a car, my car overturned. My car overturned, and the only person out of four of us, my sister, died. And I remember she was carrying, when the accident happened, it was right in the bush. After some time, we saw there was an oncoming bus, and they put us on the, but she literally died in my arms. We were trying to rush her to the next nearby town. She died. Now that experience, so two things. We could not be present to, for the burial of our mother. And she was special. And second, my sister was the most, all of them, all my sisters were just special. She was the most spiritual of them amongst the group, passed away. And I remember she was dying. I said to myself, God, why don't you take me also? I said that. And of course, I mean, I didn't know what I was talking, but that experience in retrospect served to make me a better Christian. Because what happened, as we returned to the capital city, and of course I had to bury my sister, I'd not been even going to church at the time. Why? Well, because the pressure of work I was working with the Prime Minister, and especially the speech writing, was quite burdensome or challenging. But there it is. Again, things happen, whatever the circumstances. And when you are bent on your spiritual journey, things happen, tragedies happen. They either will sink you or they will sustain you. In my case, they sustained me. This woman, my sister, she was my mentor. And again, so spiritual, by the way. The firstborn, her firstborn, was at that time, had just returned from Oxford University, St. Stephen's College, with an MPhil in theology. He was a lawyer, and how he chose to join the ministry was another story. I mean, it can take a long time, but he had just graduated, come back. He had been assigned a position as priest nearby. He's the one, by the way, who came when she died, and he said, "Uncle, I'm going to preach. I've asked the bishop, and the bishop has given permission for me to preach." And he preached at the sending off of his mother. And he was referring to us, this mother, this woman, and what she did. And a brief story, since you have I'll share, Raj, I'll share this. It's very, very interesting. In his testimony, in his sermon, rather, he spoke of how, and this was true, the case of how his mother had some issues, before she had some miscarriages before, in fact, he was born. And what did she do? She started now praying. It's especially a prayer. This was a prayer in the Bible. Prayed by it's Samuel, the prophet Samuel's mother prayed this prayer. Say, God, I'm having these issues. To paraphrase, but when you gave me a child, I will dedicate him to you. And that's what happened. This child was born. She never shared this story with anyone until after, you see, and then comes the, he became a priest. I mean, when deciding, he graduated in law. And then the time to make a decision, he decided to join the ministry. So he told the mother, say, Mommy, I want to join the ministry. And the mother called me, said, this is what has happened. And my brother, this is the story. She shared the story with me. And then after that, he came to see me. And he said, Uncle, this is what has happened. I have decided to join the ministry. And I tell you, I played the devil's advocate. I said, but how could you do this? Look, law, you're going to get a lot of money, there is fame, etc., etc. And this is Africa, and you become a priest, they're not going to pay you a lot of, that. So I was like playing a devil's advocate. So he looked at me, says, yes, I understand. You mean well, Uncle, but I have decided I'm joining the ministry. Then subsequently, he was offered a scholarship to Oxford University. So imagine, the mother, until he came back after he had been ordained priest, that's when she shared her story. She shared the story. This is the woman, my sister. And it's just amazing. So you touched me. The other tragedy, Roger, brother, this is an important question, but it's the other tragedy. Shortly after I received my vocation, and by the way, that's another case. I received my vocation, my spiritual calling. Again, this happened because I was helping this woman. I was with an NGO helping orphans and widows. And one day I woke up at 4 a.m. 4 a.m. I opened the Bible, not looking for any particular verse. By my side, I opened the Bible. I was still in bed, opened the Bible. The finger touched this chapter 1, book of Isaiah, chapter 1, verse 17. Learn to do right, stop doing wrong, stand up for the oppressed, defend the orphan, and help the widow, support the widow. I'm paraphrasing that. Exactly what I was doing. I knelt down.
Got your calling.
I got my calling. Now, shortly after, about 3-4 months later, I had to return here to the United States because my family, my wife, and our 2 children were here. And again, brother, a few months later, I was happy to be reunited. I got my vocation, right? United with my family. A few months later, 3-4 months later, my wife wakes up. She was having some pain. So we took her to the hospital. After some medical exams, etc., blood, etc., the doctor said, came and they diagnosed her with cancer, liver cancer. And I said, what? I tell you, I was not happy with my God. I said, God, how can this be? This is the most important person in my life. You have given me my vocation, and I'm ready to serve you. And this woman is the most important person in my life. I never called her during the 40 or so years, 38 to be exact, 38 and a half. I never called her by her first name. I called her Mommy every time. And by the way, she was also a daughter of a reverend and all, came from a very radical life. So I complained to my God. But as I was in communication with my God, I was at peace. I was at peace. And the message was clear. It's like, don't worry. Regardless of what had happened. And we took her to Mount Sinai. At that time, they had specialty in, very specializing in liver cancer. They confirmed the diagnosis. They gave her, the initial medical center, had given her 2 years to live. Just imagine. I'd just been rejoined with her. A few months later, 2 years to live. Mount Sinai gave her quite some time, 5 years. They didn't say 5 immediately, but we did my best. We did our best. They did their best. And even I, of course, imagine during my career, 30 or so years, I used to travel almost like more than 90% of the time. I was hardly with family. But I resolved never to travel. So for 5 years, she was with us. We were together. And even towards the end, her last year and a half, the doctor said to me, Isaiah, we have tried our best. But Janet, that was her name, they didn't have much time. They gave her exactly one and a half years. And they said, it's going to be extra heavy on you. We need to place her in an institution, a place. And I said, no, this woman has been with me for almost close to 40 years, 38 and a half years. She's going to be, she's not going nowhere. She'll be in our home. So our place was transformed into some, we had a 24-hour nurse with us until her passing. It was a heavy blow, but the God who provides the vision, the vocation, He's a loving God. He's a compassionate God. Because during that time, where did the energy come from? He provided the energy to caregive. I and my 2 children. And our 2 children said, look, they were headed for graduate work, etc. They said, we can't leave you alone. They stayed. And they're still with me. And so
Whole family was together, yeah.
Spiritually together. And that's something, because I say 5 or so years during the time she was with me, and we were together. They became the most intimate because there was nothing else to distract me, no trouble for work, etc. We lived in the same place. And
quality time, yeah.
Exactly, quality time. So these transcended the tragic part. I mean, she was, yes, we knew it was just a matter of time, but God was present with us, and it's just amazing. So she passed on, and then after that, of course, I had to face, this reality of being without her. It was not there.
Starting over.
Starting over. And this has been for 10 years. It's 28th of June of this year. So I started over. And now starting over, you'd reference resetting and rebouncing back. Now rebouncing with even more energy from a spiritual standpoint. I'm more committed because I see her in every woman that I serve. I see mommy in every woman, every girl, regardless of where they come from. And you see, so my vocation, my spiritual.
Yeah, you're made whole.
Exactly, we're made whole. Exactly, and there again, going back, referencing, it's like living now is my soul uniquely living, right, in the heart and mind of my God, but enjoying it. So I'm serving. She's okay. From time to time, I would say, oh, I miss mommy, and but look, it's like she's talking to me and say, oh, I'm there spiritually, but you have a lot of mommies there you are serving. So my dedication to this mission of women, gender equality and empowerment.
Yeah, women empowerment, yeah.
Is in fact has been much. Of course, in the full context of the wellness and peace of humanity and of the United Nations. So you asked again, Brother Raj, a very, it has brought to light. So I've shared with you very candidly. I haven't done this before. I mean, in a setting, this is the first time, and thanks to Guruji and
yeah, thank you so much for sharing that intimate details. I see the joy and love exuding through you. You have resolved all the conflicts, and you're totally under the command of Jesus.
Yes.
Thank you again. God bless you.
Thank you most kindly. Thank you.
Ambassador, I have a question. First of all, I've really appreciated and enjoyed listening to your story, and especially as it relates to how you found yourself on the path, and how, for me, the journey has been one less of having a revelation as to just discovering that I was on a path, and everything that brought me to that path was put there for me. So along those lines, I'm wondering if you have any suggestions as to what could be made better from an education perspective to maybe allow people to find their path and to become more inculcated with a culture of peace in Africa in particular. I've been working on helping to accelerate peace education in the African Union as called for in Agenda 2063. But there's really no activity being done in a coordinated way across the whole AU to define curriculum or to, do the background work to manifest that. So I was wondering if you had any comments along those lines to help people, and children especially, and youth, get to the point where this is more inculcated into society.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent question again. And before I do that, let me, sorry.
We can hear.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
I don't know what has happened. I've I lost the photo. Can
We can see
you
you.
hear me?
Yeah, go to
Can
G. I
you
think
see
you have
me?
me spotlighted
It's already.
Okay, but
instead of the.
I can't see you. But anyhow, you can hear me. Can you see me?
Yes.
Yes. If you go to gallery view, you'd be able to see everybody.
Oh,
Pretty sure.
okay, let's see. All right, let's see. There's something that I did, but you can hear me, see me?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, it's all right. I'll forego the photo. As I was saying, you know, I had because I'm enjoying this so much. I had inadvertently I'd slipped the name of the Samuel, the prophet Samuel's mother was Hannah, by the way, Hannah, because it's when I was sharing the story of my sibling, my sister Dorcas Mildred's. Okay, yes, and a very important question because you know, question of especially that it touches youth, as you know, and thank you again for your service with the African Union in helping us realize the Agenda 2063. Extremely important. And as you know, youth, of course, Africa has got, it's the largest youth demographic, right? Globally.
Right.
Largest youth demographic globally. You see, for instance, in the case of Zambia, was my country I was born, 73% of the population is 35 and below. 73%. In case of Kenya, for instance, about 75. So a huge youth population. Now, this both a challenge, but also an opportunity. And therefore, meaning, depending on how we handle it, it can be provide a boon or opposite, and not just continent, regionally as a continent, but also to the at universal level. So, two things I see which come to mind, first of all, 2 points. One, the role of peace, first peace as the ultimate, the global goal. I believe that, you know, something, one, the spiritual heritage, in Africa, you know, has an important role to play. Now, depending, and I say depending because, as I'm sure you are aware, this is just sort of a personal opinion. As I said, we have a huge youth population, and it's just to what extent do the cultural norms, you know, in various countries, what impact, if at all, do they have on our huge youth demographic? I would like to believe that they still are playing a very important role. I would like to believe that. Because if not, and this has to be, you know, it could cause problems down the road. So the way I see it, and I say this confidential, I mean with confidence, because growing up again as a young man, etc., in Africa, in Zambia, respect for the elders, respect for the culture, the cultural norms, and you know, just practices was paramount. I had earlier reference to how, you know, my mother would say, when you meet an older woman, you don't call her by the name, you say my or mother first before anything. How are you? You see, so that was a grounding. And I tend to believe this is still the case to a large extent. Respect for the elders, the community norms, you know, norms which, and values and virtues which bind the community together. I would like to believe that this is still the case. It's extremely important. And this is where, again, education, what do we do to nurture, to ensure, to strengthen that the impact of the, you know, the cultural norms and of the past, because they are good. They keep you together. I mean, for instance, when I look back, of course, Christianity has been very important. And now, of course, interfaith, yes, it's been important, but it has only to the extent it has reaffirmed or strengthened my moral and spiritual backbone, which largely I inherited. I mean, when I say it was fed into me. And so by this token, I would like to believe, and this is where we have to do as much as we can. You may be more knowledgeable on this than I, from my experience, but there has to be a deliberate effort to improve our, or, you know, where necessary, improve our education programs. Absolutely. I'm not an educationist, but frankly, what do we lose? We are bound to gain if we ensure looking at the curricula introduce these elements of the culture, the cultural norm, things which have sustained African society at large for millennia. You know, respect for the dignity and divinity of the other person, regardless of where they come from. That is extremely important. Now, so that is for the past, but also, of course, ensure that in our curricula, it's not just a matter of just copying, right? Because there's been, as you know, a tendency, you know, sometimes we just copy what's the in thing from the West, from Europe, etc. There has to, again, we have to, it's not just government. It's extremely important to ensure, come up with curricula which address the needs of our youth in particular. So we have, and you know, this is African youth, and I'm sure you're familiar with this. Very, very smart, very, very intelligent. I mean, they are no less intelligent than the folks you meet out there in Manhattan or in Paris or in France or wherever. They are very, very smart, but also gullible to an extent. I mean, so this is why we want to make sure that it's not just a matter of doing it the way it's done in different cultures. No, of course, they are free to do what they need to do, not what just they want to do. So education has an important role. And how do we do this? Again, that's something that you experts can advise. When I say not just experts, because this is a mistake we have made in Africa in the past, and not just in Africa, but also the approach by the so-called the donors and, you know, donor community sometimes. It was part of that colonial mindset. Expert goes to a community and the expert says, I know your problem. I know what you need. You do it the way I want you to do it. See that? No. The expert has to be humble enough to respond to the needs of of the the community and the country. That's so I see here making use of the knowledge and the expertise of the locals, and we have a lot of people still, some they're so-called like retired. I don't like the term. When you retire, it doesn't mean that you are no good. No, in fact, some of my mentors have been people who have so-called who are retired, but excellent brains, except they are not utilized. So it's important for the experts who come up from abroad, work hand in glove with local professionals. You can find them in places. Come up with the NGOs, especially NGOs run by women. They are very extremely. I'm working with some of them. They'll come up with suggestions, the best suggestions of how to address the problem, and involving the youth themselves. The youths, because after all, they're the ones, they know what they want, they know what they would like, what they need, and their problems. Hello, can you hear me? Siwale? Hello?
So, Ambassador.
Can you hear me? I think
yes.
we have
yes. I'm sorry. I was not able to mute, but we've been able to hear you. Thank you very much for that insight. And I'll tell you, a lot of the things you were saying reinforced the messages that I find myself saying, the statistics and the messages. And thank you for that. I took some notes and would love to maybe even find, you're not an educator, as you say, but you have a finance and economics background.
That's
and I've been very interested in the economic modeling of what lack of peace costs, as well as what inculcating peace into the society would bring to Africa. So that's an interesting kind of slant and tangent on this whole topic.
Excellent. That is very interesting. I'm sorry, when I called out a name. That's what my son, who is a savvy, is computer savvy. So that's why. No, and the point by peace, and again, inculcating peace, that will be very, very useful. But of course, mindful, and I always approach peace from perspective of peace is multifaceted, right?
Mm-hmm.
To include, of course, and I quote Ralph Johnson Bunch's
Sure.
the food and rice, shelter, health, education, and that respect for the human dignity part of it. So multifaceted, and how do you? That is an excellent. That's something that is that's extremely helpful. And but again, I started off by saying it's with youth, given the youth dimension in Africa, and you have these. It's either a challenge right now, and a challenge, especially what is right now. The statistics are very sobering. Lack of unemployment. Almost half of it, people are unemployed, and these are kids. They are very smart. Some are they have degrees or diplomas, etc. But they are on the streets. They are virtually not doing as much. What can be done? So the role there of, by the way, vocational training. I have a couple of two NGOs that I started. One was a vocational training. Teaching women. Again, the first one, visionary empowerment, devoted to women, and skills training, and just teaching them, imparting these vocational skills training, business skills. Oh my God, the impact on their dignity, the impact on their wellness was just tremendous. You know, for instance, the first program I started, we started with Vision Empowerment, and we took on, didn't come from us, the recommendation, the skill training proposal came from UNESCO. UNESCO gave me a grant after I received my vocation. And and then we worked very closely with the churches, the Catholic Church, and to identify the orphans, the widows, etc. And then we worked with the Ministry of Social Services, and then they came up with and the vocational training as well, came up with the recommendation of teaching our orphans and widows in knitting skills. So we did just that. And it was amazing because I got a grant from UNESCO. We were able to train over 700 of these women, you know, orphans and widows. We had some men as well, and taught them how to run these micro enterprises. And it was amazing.
Interesting.
It was amazing. You know, so that's a vocational skill. So when I say about when you come up with a curriculum, it has to be responsive to the needs on the ground. And so vocational skills training, in my view, there is a lot of demand for that. Instead of just the exclusively formal education. So that's I have hopes. I'm very, very optimistic.
Ambassador.
Yes.
I have another meeting coming up. So we'll continue another section with you because I know you have so much experience, and people are over 730 people are watching this event. They all are enjoying. That's a great part.
So, I didn't know. I thought I saw 7.
That is over 10 people join in the meeting in and out.
I'm just.
But we are doing the live streaming. People are watching from abroad.
Okay, great.
732 right now. So we'll continue another time. And I have a message for everybody. Sunday 27th will be our annual spiritual festival. It will be a 35th annual Interfaith prayer ceremony and the holiday celebration. I want to invite everyone. It will be a 3-hour program. Each person will get a few minutes to present themselves. And I have some special speakers coming up. Definitely Ambassador will be there. And some other events are coming. I'll invite privately. So thank you, Ambassador, for enlightening us with your spiritual wisdom. It was wonderful to hear you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure, Guruji, as my beloved brother, for this opportunity to share my intimate relationship with my ever-present God of many names. So thank you kindly.
It's very hard to get a spiritualist, you know. A lot of time people bring their own religious or cultural aspects to try to implement in interfaith events, but you brought it like a really, really wide range. I know that is your experience from your family and the UN. Now, even though you are retired, I won't say you are retired, you are exploring as a universal being to help people, you know. That's a wonderful work you are doing, more than you and I. That's what I'd say. You are doing the grassroots work. That's
yes.
I always
yes. No, for the UN is my UN family now.
Family, correct.
I've been, and incidentally, something I didn't say, because I say UN family, UN means so much to me as the transformation.
UN universal family.
UN family.
Thank you.
So, again, thank you so much, and God bless you always.
Thank you, everyone. See you next Wednesday. Appreciate it.
Yes, I look forward to that. Thank you kindly.
I'll send you the video link. I'll upload on YouTube. I'll send it to you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You can do the edit as much as you want.
No editing raw, because nobody's here to help me to edit it.
And thank you. Thank you
Already on
again.
all the Facebook pages. So thank you, all of my friends.